Ah, a nice little spot to show everyone your best self. And a place for your fluffy, impy friend to live. Make yourself comfortable. Here's where you come to customize your imp. This is just a small selection. There will be lots more soon. Ah, the Home Space Editor. A great place to start your creative journey. We're still working on this right now. In time, you'll be able to put things you've made here so it feels like your own. Look at all the wonderful things you found. There's lots more where these came from. And look at the things the folks at Media Molecule left for you in MM stuff. This is dream shaping. Here you have the power to manifest anything you can imagine. Anything. Music, a story, a piece of art, a whole game, even something there isn't a word for yet. Create things from scratch using the dream tools. Or you can use them to remix something another dreamer has made. For now, I'll take you to the Dreams Workshop, where my friend, the Dreams Architect, will introduce you to the secrets of creation. Go on in. He won't bite. Promise. So you want to learn the ropes of dream shaping, but you don't know where the tools are on the shelf, or how to use that intriguing gadget, or you want to know what that strange contraption over there does. Architect, assist us. Ah, hello, Architect.
Hello, Queenie. Why am I a squirrel?
Just a temporary physical form for you. I like it. It's cute.
Well, thank you. It's better than the last one.
Now, Show this dream shaper how to unleash their creative powers.
Done! Follow me, Dreamer. Oh, it's so exciting that you're here. I have been really looking forward to this. There is so much to show you. Gameplay, animation, art. There's no limit to what's possible. This is the Dreams Workshop. Which controller do you have? I hope you've got your imp under control. I've got some spectacular tricks to show you. I hope you've got your imp under control. I've got some spectacular tricks to show you, and some that are just all right. Make sure you follow the steps carefully if you want to get the most out of this tutorial. It's not just about getting to the end, it's the journey that counts. Shortly, you'll be in edit mode, creating and editing your own. Did you find that clue? It was on the back of one of those shapes. Looks a bit like a... Think back to the first clue. The cone was on top of the cylinder, right? But how can you move them? Well, in edit mode, you interact with everything using your imp, the very tip of your imp's pointy part. Now, that looks pretty good. At least from this angle. Creating scenes in three-dimensional space means that you should always look at your creations from different angles. The easiest way to do that is with the grab cam. Instead of moving the objects you grab, grab cam moves your point of view. Hey, look at that. Another clue. It's a molecule. I know because I put it there. Did you find the last clue? It was on the back of the orange cube. What on earth could it mean? That was my final clue telling you where to go. The island right above us. I know you're an expert in moving around with the... Right, here's the puppet I reserved for you. Let's call her Connie, 'cause she looks like a cone. We need to help Connie walk through the door to complete this tutorial. To do that, we're gonna have to switch over to play mode. Remember, right now you're in edit mode. This is where you create and edit your scenes. In play mode, you can experience the scene just like a player would if they found it in the Dreamiverse. You can't make any changes in play mode, but you can take control of character.
Want to carry on with the fundamentals? You can also press the circle button to see other topics.
You might be able to animate wobbly platforms with the action recorder, but keyframes are where animation gets serious. Nice try, Cuthbert, but leave the dream shaping to the experts. We're going to use keyframes to animate the platforms so Connie can reach the exit. A keyframe records any changes you make to an object, such as its position, tweak menu settings, or anything else you can think of. Then it stores those changes in a gadget that you can switch on and off. Okay, let's use keyframes to help Connie get across those platforms. First, go to the assembly menu. If it's closed, press the square button to open it. Look for the animate button, which has a clapperboard icon, and click on that. Start by selecting the keyframe gadget, which is the one with the diamond and the plus sign. Then stamp it in the scene above the first gap. You'll notice there's now a stop recording button in the context menu, and your imp now looks like a red keyframe. That means the keyframe gadget is recording any changes you make in the scene. But unlike the action recorder, it only records the state of things, not a period of time. It's probably easier to understand if we put it into practice. Let's try it on the block that's on the ground in front of Connie. Grab it with R2 and place it between the first two platforms. You'll see some dashed lines appear on the block. These tell you that the keyframe has recorded the change you've made to the object. You can move it as many times as you like. It'll only store the final result. If that's not the outcome you wanted, you can always undo your last change with the left directional button. The next bit is super important. To finish and store your changes in the keyframe, you need to select the Stop Recording button in the context menu. Select it now and see what happens. That's right. The block has snapped back to its original position. That's because the keyframe isn't active right now. But we can still see what's recorded by selecting the gadget with X. There, the block is back. Now that you've recorded a keyframe, let's look at how to activate it. Okay then, we've made a simple keyframe animation. Now it's time to smooth it out and make it look better. Like almost everything in Dreams, keyframes can be tweaked. So open this one's tweak menu, hold L1, then press the square button over it. You'll see two sliders at the bottom, slow power up and slow power down. These determine how long it takes for the keyframe to turn on fully. Hover over the slow power up slider now and hold X. Then move your imp to the right to increase the value. Let's set it to 1 second for now. It looks like the bridge across the next gap has collapsed. We could just move it back into place, but where's the fun in that? Let's perform a little bit of magic instead. Go to the Assembly menu and select another keyframe from the Animate menu. Stamp it above the gap with R2 or X. Now see if you can reassemble the bridge. Grab the first part and move it back where it should be. One of the great things about keyframes is that they can affect multiple objects. So you can put the other half of the bridge back too. Then select Stop Recording from the context menu to store your changes. Once recording stops, the bridge will go back to its original position. So, select the keyframe with X if you want to see those changes again. I could have done a better job at positioning the bridge. Nothing to worry about though, because editing a keyframe is easy. Just select the Edit Keyframe button in the context menu. It's got the same icon as a keyframe gadget. This allows you to make changes to the keyframe. You can remove things from a keyframe by pressing the triangle button over them. And now the bridges are back on the ground. Let's put them back into place, but this time, make sure they're a bit straighter. Remember, when you're grabbing things, you can realign them by pressing the triangle button. There we go. Much better. You can select Stop Recording again to finish editing this keyframe. The bridge's new position is already stored in the keyframe, so all we need now is a way to activate it. That's where this trigger zone will come in handy. Let's select it to see what zone it covers. It's not in the gap this time. It's over this button. First, create a wire from the trigger zone's output using R2 or X. Then stretch it over to the keyframe and connect it to its power port. When Connie steps on the button now, the keyframe will be switched on. But what happens when she leaves the trigger zone? Let's test it in play mode to find out. Just as I thought. When Connie moves away, the keyframe switches off. Let's head back to edit mode and see what we can do about that. Of course, we could just move the trigger zone into the gap, but this is an animation tutorial. So let's see if we can use the keyframe's tweak menu to fix the problem. Open it now with the L1 and square button shortcut and have a look at the options there. Hovering over the buttons will bring up their names. The one we're interested in is called Keep Changes. With this option turned on, any changes made by the animation will be permanent. So once Connie activates the keyframe, the bridge will stay in its new position until you rewind the scene. Since we're already in the tweak menu, let's add some smoothing to that animation. I think I'll set it to 2 seconds this time. Okay, time to close the tweak menu with L1 and the circle button. Then try out these changes in play mode. How's that for a magic trick? You can switch back to edit mode, rewind time, and experiment with the keyframe to see what else you can do. Maybe you could try keyframing a tweak menu setting, or animating some elements from the tutorial collection. When you're done, move on to the next step, and I'll show you how to use keyframes on a timeline. Keyframes are great for making simple animations. But if you want to make something more complex, you need a timeline. See that little block floating between the last two platforms? Let's use keyframes on a timeline to animate it. Start by selecting a timeline from the Animate menu. Stamp it down somewhere around the last gap. Then you can use the circle button to unequip the gadget. Now open the timeline, hold L1 over it and press X. This is the timeline canvas. You can move the canvas with your imp by grabbing it with R2. The numbers along the top are seconds, and you can see it set to 8 seconds by default. If you grab the edges with X, you can extend or shorten the canvas. Try setting it to around 6 seconds. If you ever need extra space to add more things, you can also extend the bottom of the timeline. Once you're comfortable with moving and resizing the timeline canvas, move on to the next step and we'll start adding things to it. Now, it's time to animate the floating block. Get a new keyframe from the Animate menu and stamp it in the scene. Now grab and move the block to its starting position at the edge of the platform where Cuthbert's waiting. Once the block's in place, remember to press the Stop Recording button in the context menu. Now, grab the keyframe gadget and move it over the timeline. The gadget will snap to it. Place it at the very start of the timeline. Then get another keyframe from the Animate menu. We'll use this one to record the block's second position. This time, stamp the keyframe directly onto the timeline. Around the 2-second mark is good, on the same row as the first keyframe. Move the floating block to the opposite side of the gap. Now stop recording. Hover over the timeline canvas and play controls will appear. Using these controls, you can preview just the timeline without playing the rest of the scene. Select the play button to preview your animation. As you can see, gadgets are only active when the timeline's playhead is over them. So, when neither of the keyframes are switched on, the block goes right back to its original position. Now we need to edit the animation so the first keyframe blends into the second. To do that, open the first keyframe's tweak menu with L1 and the square button. Now that the keyframe is on a timeline, the buttons that were grayed out before are available. These are blend types, and they change how one keyframe merges into the next. Select the linear button, which will blend to the next keyframe at a constant speed. If you press the timeline's play button now, you'll see the platform move smoothly between the keyframes' positions. Feel free to try out other blend types and see how they affect the animation. Then move on to the next step when you're ready. We've got the platform moving smoothly now, but we can still improve how it works. Let's begin by making it pause for a moment at the start and finish, so Connie has an easier time getting on. All we have to do is scale the keyframes on the timeline, so they last longer. You might want to get up close to the first keyframe before we start. Now, with your imp over the keyframe, hold the up directional button to extend it. Then do the same with the second keyframe. Now that the keyframes are longer, the blend has become quicker. You can see it for yourself by selecting the play button under the timeline. If you want to scale a keyframe more precisely, you can do that with its trim handles. Trim handles are the dotted lines at the beginning and end of keyframes. Grab them now with R2 to give it a try. We should get the platform back to where it started now, but instead of adding a new keyframe, we're going to clone the first one. You remember how to clone things, right? Just hold L1 and grab the first keyframe with R2. Now drag it past the second keyframe and place it by releasing R2. Now we just need to add the blending between the last two keyframes. Only this time, we'll use a shortcut instead of the tweak menu. Just hover over the space between those keyframes, then hold L1 and press X. There you go, one linear blend added. You can even cycle through different blend types by keeping L1 held and pressing X again. I love shortcuts, because I'm lazy. Use the play controls on the timeline to preview the animation. Move on to the final step when you're ready to continue. Now, because there's some space at the end of the timeline where none of the keyframes are active, the platform just snaps right back to its original position. There's a few ways we could fix this. For example, we could shorten the timeline so there's no gap at the end. We could also lengthen the keyframe animation so it fills up the whole timeline. Or we could turn on Keep Changes in the last keyframe's tweak menu. The last step is tweaking the timeline itself. So, hold L1 anywhere over it, then press the square button to see all of its properties. The playback speed makes it go faster or slower. But what we're interested in right now is the playback mode. When it's set to once, the whole timeline will play, even if it was only powered for a split second. When it's set to sustain, it will only play when it has constant power. It will stop when it loses power, then resume from that point if it's turned on again. And if it's set to loop, it will repeat over and over as long as it has power. That sounds like the best option for this timeline, so select that one. Okay, it looks like we're good to go. You can close the timeline now by selecting the cross icon in the top right corner. Or you can hold L1 over the timeline itself, then press the circle button. Click L3 to rewind time and test out your changes in play mode. Once you're happy with everything, exit through the door to complete this tutorial.
Hi, I'm Mark, Creative Director of Media Molecule, and I'm going to present a simple masterclass that will hopefully help you use some of what so far and turn that into an entire game. I'm going to be focusing on a remix of the Dreamiverse Dash game. That means take a copy of something, mess around with it, which is always a really good way to learn. I will be reiterating some of the basics that you may have already learnt, but basics make for strong foundations, and strong foundations make for strong structures. Yes. So, first of all, try playing the game, get familiar with it, and when you get past the finish line, you'll dive in and start tinkering. Okay, let's start by making sure we feel comfortable navigating the space. So here's a quick reminder of how we do this. If you feel you're already a master at camera controls, then you can skip this step. Use the left stick to move forwards, backwards, left or right. Okay, you should be confident about moving around with camera controls now. So let's start changing the actual scene. Before we do that though, you may have noticed lots of these little bright cubes scattered around. These are gadgets. We don't need to see them for now, so let's hide them. Go to the menu, find the Show Hide button, and make sure electronics are turned off. That'll make things a bit clearer. Okay. Let's start changing the track layout. In this step, I'll be talking about deleting, moving, and cloning. If you feel you're already a master of these techniques, then feel free to skip this. Hello again. I know some of you out there like to be all snap with X, and then you can make the grid coarser or finer. Now, turning on Obey Auto Guides will also help with moving and placing stuff. It literally means behave as you do in the home space. Depending on which item you select, it will try to make it easier to place for you. This behaviour is determined by the creator of each individual item, with a gadget we'll discuss elsewhere. In most cases, it'll make the object align to the surface of other objects. Go ahead, have a practice at using the guides, then when you're ready, we'll move on to the next step. So, let's add some new objects to the scene without using the clone tool. If you can't see your menu, remember to press the square button to make it appear. For some new objects, we'll need to go and search the Dreamiverse. Do that by clicking this button on the assembly menu. You can go looking for whatever you want, but for the sake of this tutorial, we'll stick to the Dreamiverse collection. So make sure you're in there. Go in and choose a bounce pad with X. You can now stamp some objects into the scene using either X or R2, whichever you prefer. Let's turn on Obey Auto Guides, so it's easier to put these things on the floor. Go to the menu, select Guides, then Obey Auto Guides. Let's get another object, a balloon. Now, make sure all the guides are off and stamp a balloon in the air. Before I stamp it though, note that I can rotate it using the touchpad. Just slide your finger on the touchpad in different directions to rotate it. While we're on the subject of rotating, let me show some other ways to do this. Try grabbing something by holding R2. Then use the touchpad to rotate it, just like we did before we stamped the balloon. Another way is to grab and hold with L2 instead of R2. You can now rotate the object using the motion sensor by physically rotating your controller. Note that it rotates around the point you grabbed with the imp tip. And finally, using the L2 grab method, you can also use the left and right sticks to rotate. If you rotate using the left and right sticks like this, the gyro method, by which I mean using the motion sensor, will be disabled until you re-grab. So go ahead, try putting some new elements into the scene. Once you're comfortable with this, you know all you need to know to go off and put some new scenes together. Go to Dream Shaping, start a new game scene, and use other people's objects and characters you find in the Dreamiverse. This will get you a long way. If you feel like learning some more though, stick around and hit next when ready. So, let's add some new objects to the scene without using the clone tool. If you can't see your menu, remember to press the square button to make it appear. For some new objects, we'll need to go and search the Dreamiverse. Do that by clicking this button on the assembly menu. You can go looking for whatever you want, but for the sake of this tutorial, we'll stick to the Dreamiverse collection. So make sure you're in there. Go in and choose a bounce pad with X. So, by now you know how to build a scene from scratch. But let's explore a really quick and easy way to add some movement and bring your scenes to life. Let's animate a part of the track using Dream's very own special version of motion capture. Make sure time is paused and that you have rewound the scene. First off, find something you feel could do with a bit of movement in it. Then grab it with R2 and practice the movement you'd like it to do. Remember, you can use the left directional button to undo if you accidentally leave it in an odd place. Don't be too precious right now. We'll learn how to be more precise later on. Let's just get something moving to learn the principle. Okay, when you feel you've got a good idea of what movement you're going to do, open the menu with the square button, find the Animate button, and grab yourself an action recorder. You'll now have an action recorder gadget on the end of your imp. You may notice that all other gadgets in the scene have appeared, if you'd previously hidden them. We want to see gadgets now, so this is all fine. Stamp it into the scene with the X button. You can move this later if you like, just put it out of the way for now, in the corner for example. This object will capture and store the performance you are about to make. Once you've placed it, it will be armed and ready to start recording. But don't panic. It isn't actually recording yet. Take your time, breathe. Only when you grab the item you want to move will the recording start. So let's do it. Remember, it will only record while you are actually grabbing something, unless you have time running already. So you can let go, have a cough or a sneeze for example, then re-grab and carry on adding more movement if you like. If you feel that you want to start again, just hit the retake button. You'll have a fresh recording attempt. When you feel you're happy enough, press the stop recording button to finish capturing your moves. Congratulations! You just officially became an animator. Start time using this button, or use the R3 shortcut, and hey presto, movement. By default, things animated with this technique will loop forever. If you want to learn more about animating, then check out the animation tutorials. Now, not only do you know how to collage a scene together, you can animate it too. So there's really nothing to stop you making some great platforming style games now. Go on, have a go. Press next to learn about some more exciting stuff. Hello again. Let's get a bit deeper now. Assuming you haven't gone triangle button mad and deleted everything in the scene, there will be some objects in there that you can modify in ways other than just deleting them or moving them. Let's find one of these bounce pads, for example. Let's turn on electronics, as we want to look at those now. If they aren't already visible, then go to the Show Hide on the menu and make sure electronics are turned on. Notice if you hover over the object you animated, you'll see the path that it follows. And the gadget the animation is in will throb. You can delete the gadget with the triangle button if you want, or leave it. It's up to you. Position your IMP's tip over the object and select it with X. You'll then see these contextual buttons appear. This bounce pad isn't actually a single object. It's a few objects that have been grouped together. But we can go into this group to mess around with the individual members of it, much like going into a folder on a computer. Press this button to scope into the group. You'll notice everything else go grey and blurred, except the things in the group. Yes, some of these things are still colourful. They're a special case, which we'll ignore for now. Pressing the Hide Everything Else button will make it super clear what is in this group, as it will hide everything else. We are now scoped into this bounce pad, and you'll notice that a gadget has appeared, which was invisible before. Gadgets will hide themselves unless you are in the same scope as them. There are exceptions to this, but we don't need to concern ourselves with those right now. So, you can go back or leave this scope by pressing this button in the corner. You can also use a shortcut to scope in and out. Hover over the object, hold L1 and tap X. This will take us in. Holding L1 and tapping circle button will take us out. In, out, in, out. Shake it all about. So, make sure you are in the bounce pad scope. You should see this gadget, a microchip. You can recognise a microchip by this little symbol. We can look inside the guts of a microchip by either selecting it with X and using the Open Microchip button, or by holding L1 and tapping X. This will tunnel us into the microchip and reveal some of its inner workings on its circuit board. It's possible you may be looking at the back of the circuit board when you first open it. If that happens, then simply move your camera to look at it from a better position. Or you can also use the L1 plus R1 trick on the circuit board to quickly zip to a better viewing position. We won't concern ourselves right now with everything on this circuit board. Let's just try changing the value on this slider using X. This will affect how high the bounce pad sends the character. Try ramping it up, and then switch to play mode to try it out. Remember, you've only changed one bounce pad though, not all of them, so try to remember which one you changed. Come back into edit mode and locate the bounce pad microchip that you left open. You can close a circuit board by pressing this little button in the corner, or by hovering the imp tip over the board itself and pressing the L1 and circle button shortcut. But feel free to leave it open if you wish. You can happily scope out of the bounce pad, but leave the circuit board open. You won't need to scope in now to change the slider, but once closed, you'll have to scope in again to see the microchip and open it up. Lots of the items in this scene have a circuit board with a slider or two on them. So hunt around the scene, scope in, find them, experiment. Come back when you feel ready to learn some more. Did you come across any camera pointers or trigger zones in your explorations yet? No? Then let's find one. There should be one right near the start gate. Assuming you haven't deleted them all, they look like this. This is a trigger zone, and this is a camera pointer. Notice that when you hover your imp tip over either of these gadgets, a wire will appear. This shows us that they're connected to each other. A trigger zone is a way of saying, when something enters a certain area, do something. In this case, the trigger zone activates the camera pointer. When the cone character is in the trigger zone, a camera pointer will force the camera to look in a defined direction. If you select the trigger zone with the X button, then you'll see the area that it cares about. You might need to zoom out a bit to see it fully. If you position your imp tip over the green zone, you'll see that arrows appear. These show us that we can change the dimensions of the area. Just hold down R2 and drag. Press the circle button to deselect the trigger zone. There is another way to change the parameters of a trigger zone that gives you more control, but I'll save that for another time. We'll keep it simple for now. If you now select the camera pointer, you'll see some arrows appear. These show you the way the gadget wants to make the camera look. If you grab the camera pointer gadget by holding L2 instead of R2, you'll be able to change the defined angle. Use either the sticks or motion sensor. Let's look over here, and we'll see a trigger zone that has multiple wires coming off it. We can trace these wires to see what they are connected to. Handy little tip. If you use the L1 plus R1 trick on a wire, it'll take you to the other end of it. Very handy. We can see that we are connected to this large microchip. We'll take a look in there later. The other two wires are connected to camera pointers. If there's more than one camera pointer connected to a trigger zone, then the camera will blend between the two defined angles, based on how close the character is to each one. It's also worth noting, if you have a camera pointer in a scene that isn't connected to a trigger zone, then it will be on all the time and take away a player's ability to manually control the camera angle. When you feel you've understood trigger zones and camera pointers, why not try adding your own somewhere? You'll find the bits you need under Gadgets in the menu. Trigger zones live in Sensors and Input, and camera pointers live in Cameras and Lighting. Simply stamp them into the scene and connect them like so. Grab this little port with X or R2 and connect it to the power port on the camera pointer. Have a little play, and when you feel you've got it, we can move on to the next step.